Goldenrod is one of my favorite herbs to forage for, and today that's exactly what we are talking about. We're talking about goldenrod, harvesting goldenrod, using goldenrod, and the medicinal uses of it. It's one of the most prolific herbs growing freely and wildly that you can find right now at the making of this video, typically between the end of summer and the beginning of fall. We're going to talk about it today. Make sure before you do anything else that you subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell. That way you get notifications of every single time I post a new video. Let's get started. So recently I have been scavenging for a place for goldenrod picking. And I have seen a lot of goldenrod along the roadside, which is very, very typical this time of year. But I didn't really want to harvest goldenrod directly from the roadside. The reason for that is whenever you're harvesting any kind of herb, you don't really want herbs that can have road runoff. There are chemicals that are on the road, oil, gasoline, and all of that runs off into your herbs that you might be picking from the roadside, especially ditch areas. So when you're harvesting, you want to kind of look for a place that is up on a hill where the road of runoff doesn't come, or further into a field or a forest, depending on what kind of herb you're foraging for. So the last few weeks I've been looking for a great spot. I've never really gone and foraged for goldenrod as extensively as I did this year, but I couldn't find a place that didn't have road runoff. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll start looking in fields and kind of ask the owner if I can forage in their field. And lo and behold, one day, a couple weeks ago, I went up to my grandparents' farm and there was just lush goldenrod all along the fence row. The fence row hadn't been weed eated in quite some time. Unfortunately, my grandfather has cancer, and so he hasn't been able to do that, and the farmer renting his land has not weed eated, or thankfully put weed killer, has not done that on the fence row. And so I had this very available to me patch of goldenrod all along the fence line. So I went and I picked some, and it was just wonderful. So when you're picking goldenrod, you want to make sure that you leave some goldenrod behind. That way every year it'll come back. Now that's not to say it won't get weed eated or chopped down, but at least you left it there so that it will come back every year. That's just this part of sustainable herbalism. And I don't say that in a way that that you wouldn't do that, but it's just I didn't really think about it when I first started foraging, so it's something I'm sharing with you. So goldenrod, a lot of people think that goldenrod is ragweed, and it's not. Ragweed, almost everybody is allergic to. Goldenrod, almost nobody is allergic to at all. There is, of course, that possibility, but it's very, very rare. Now, when you're harvesting goldenrod, it's one of those herbs where you can actually harvest it when the flowers are open, and you should harvest it when the flowers are open. You harvest the flower heads and the leaves. What I like to do is cut the stem off. Cut the stem towards the bottom of the ground. You don't have to go all the way down to the ground. But until the last set of good looking leaves, I will cut it off, and then I will come back home and hang the goldenrod for it to dry. Now, a lot of people will just take the leaves off the stem right away and cut the flower heads off. But I like to come, number one, it's pretty in my kitchen, and then it's easier to hang if you leave the stems intact. Now, you could certainly use the stems, but I just like to throw them out. They don't have much medicinal value. Now, in Native American culture and cultures across the world, but mostly in Aboriginal people, they do use the root. But in Western herbalism, we don't tend to do that as much. It's mostly just the leaves and the flower heads, and that is what most studies have been done on, are the leaves and the flower head. So there are about 3 main types of goldenrod, but there are many species, hundreds of species. But I'm gonna go over the ones that you might see most often. European goldenrod obviously grows mostly throughout Europe. We don't have it really here in the North America area, but we do have early goldenrod and Canadian goldenrod. And what I have picked recently is Canadian goldenrod. We have that running rampant in here. And what Native Americans mostly used here in the North Americas was also Canadian goldenrod. So the botanical name of goldenrod is solidago, or solidago, however you want to say it. But it comes from a word meaning to make whole. And the reason for this is because goldenrod for centuries has mostly been known to be a healing agent for wounds. Wounds, burns, skin irritation, but you would pack goldenrod into a wound and it would heal it immensely well. Goldenrod is well known for its ability to treat urinary tract disorders and its efficacy as a UTI herb. It's also used in Germany as an agent to increase urine as a treatment for kidney and bladder inflammation. Unbelievably, yet not surprisingly, goldenrod isn't used much by medicinal professionals in North America. It is, however, widely used by herbalists and Aboriginal peoples all over the world. As an example, Iroquois people prepare an infusion of goldenrod flowers, specifically Canadian goldenrod, as a gastrointestinal and liver aid. Some of the many uses of goldenrod are the same as a lot of wild herbs that you would forage, but goldenrod is used to remove excess mucus from your respiratory tract. It's an anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, astringent, carminative, which relieves flatulence, which is why it's really good for digestive tract issues. It's a diaphoretic, which means it causes perspiration, so it's great if you have a fever and you're trying to perspire to get rid of that fever. It's a diuretic, which is another reason it's used as a UTI herb, because it helps induce urination. And it's also, as I mentioned, a great herb for wounds. Goldenrod, the efficacy of goldenrod as a respiratory herb is wonderful. It is great at alleviating upper respiratory infections and congestions that stem from allergies, sinusitis, the flu, the common cold, and even the most recent virus that we have all across the country and the world, really. What an amazing thing that goldenrod is so readily available to us right here in fields and along trails, that we can have this herb and not have to buy it in most places. Goldenrod is also used as an exceptional throat gargle. You can actually combine goldenrod with sage, and it works really well for sore throats. It also helps with thrush and laryngitis. Many cultures use goldenrod as a digestive herb for diarrhea and other digestive tract issues, which I mentioned as well, but I just wanted to reiterate that. You can also create the poultice or just pack the herb itself, maybe wet down just a little bit or in coconut oil on skin burns and wounds and skin irritation, even poison ivy and bug bites. It works great. It even may inhibit the growth of bacteria since it is an antimicrobial, so that's another reason we use it on wounds quite often. We don't have a lot of information about goldenrod because a lot of studies have not been done. But we do know from folk medicine and various different herbalists across the country for centuries that goldenrod was used for more than just the things that I have spoken to you about. But we don't have any proof backing that up, and that's completely fine. I will tell you, like I've just stated, that goldenrod is most commonly used in all generations and all cultures for UTIs or urinary tract disorders, as a respiratory herb, and to help with kidney and bladder function, and as well as for the digestive tract. Now, there are a few different ways that you can take goldenrod. If you are trying to treat a urinary tract issue, I would suggest taking it as an infusion or a tea. You can steep 3 grams to 150 milliliters of boiled water for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then take it 2 to 4 times a day between meals. Or if you don't really want to measure anything out, just throw half a tablespoon in a boiling cup of water and you'll be good to go. But other than that, I highly recommend creating a tincture with goldenrod. Tinctures are they have no real shelf life unless they become contaminated. That's why having a good working environment is very important when you're making your tinctures. But 9 times out of 10, most of us aren't going to use these herbs all the time, but we need them when we need them. And normally it's at a time when you can't get these herbs, right? So making tinctures is really important. And one of the herbs I highly recommend you do that with is goldenrod. Now, it's very easy. If you are using the fresh plant, which I don't typically use, but you can. If you're using the fresh plant, again, the flower heads and the leaves, then you would use a 1 to 2 ratio. which is 1 part herb and 2 parts vodka of 80 proof or more. With a fresh herb, I recommend using a 100 proof vodka if at all possible. With a dried herb, you would do a 1:5 ratio. Again, that means 1 part herb, 5 parts vodka, or your liquid of choice when it comes to alcohol, but at least 80 proof vodka for a dried herb. Now, I do want to tell you that it's extremely, extremely important. I know this goes against a lot of videos and information that you read online, but we like to do evidence-based herbalism as much as possible. And so in order for you to get the right dosage every single time, you need to weigh your product. So for example, if you're doing 1 part herb and 5 parts liquid, then you would weigh out your herb to equal 1 ounce of herb and 5 fluid ounces of liquid. So that's what I'm doing today here. I am measuring out my herbs. I'm getting together 1 ounce of my dried goldenrod, and I am measuring out 5 fluid ounces of my 80 proof vodka. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put it in a mason jar. We're going to cap it tightly, make sure all of the herb is submerged underneath the liquid, and then we're going to set it in a dark cabinet or pantry for at least 4 weeks, but I like to go to 6 weeks as well. You do not want to set your tincture in the sun. I see a lot of bad information on that. That is not even a thing normally in herbalism with tinctures. You want the alcohol to do all the extracting, and sometimes sunlight can actually break down the herb before the alcohol has time to extract the medicinal properties of it, and that's not what you want. So you want to set your tincture in a dark spot, like in a cabinet or a pantry. Let that sit for 4 to 6 weeks. Check on it every couple of days. If the herb isn't submerged, you can go ahead and submerge it again or shake it up. Just make sure all of the herbal surfaces are covered with your vodka. And then after 4 to 6 weeks, you're going to strain it out and cap it in an amber bottle, and it's ready to be used at any time that you need it. Now you can find all of this information written out on my blog post that I've linked below on my website, and you can find all the medicinal information, how to harvest it, and how to make a goldenrod tincture for your homestead and family. I hope that you will do that this year because it's something that you might need this fall and winter as we come up on allergies and respiratory viruses and illnesses. And like I said, you don't have it when you need it, and it takes 4 to 6 weeks to make a tincture. So it's really important to have this on hand and have it when you're ready. All right, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you will make the tincture or go and harvest some goldenrod. Goldenrod is one of my favorite things to harvest because it's so beautiful. There are not a lot of herbs that are quite as lusciously beautiful as goldenrod to harvest in the late summer and early fall. And I always pick extra to make flower arrangements for my table or to give out, like I gave some to my grandma when I was up there foraging, and they just make beautiful flower arrangements as well. So I would encourage you to go take some quiet time, get some one-on-one nature time, and really study goldenrod. The one thing I want to encourage you to do especially is to take that goldenrod flower and smush it in between your fingers and smell it. That way you always know what goldenrod smells like. And in fact, it smells a lot like pine. And you might be surprised to know that, but it smells really good. It smells like fall. It smells like Christmas with a little bit of earthy beach smell to it. I know that doesn't make sense, but it will once you smell it. But the only real way to smell it, you're not going to sniff it as well, just the way it is, but to take it and kind of crush it in between your fingers, and you will never forget the smell of goldenrod, and you will never forget the benefits of it once you learn about the herb and forage for it. Alright guys, have a great day. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out my website with all the information below. And until next time, happy homesteading and happy wild foraging.